Howdy there, history buffs, trail riders, and music makers. Welcome back to another episode of Wild West Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Smalley. And if you're anywhere near Ford County, Kansas this coming July 31st, 2026, you better tighten your cinch and polish up your boots, because Dodge City is hosting a doubleheader event you simply cannot afford to miss. That's right, friends. The Western Trail Association's Dodge City chapter has rounded up one heck of a guest speaker for a full day of frontier history. We're talking about none other than Dr. Frank Sharp, educator, author, scholar, and a real deal cattleman with over 3 decades of experience in the saddle. Now, Dr. Sharp isn't just speaking from a textbook. He's currently the lead educator for the State of Texas herd of Longhorns at Fort Griffin, and he's devoted his life's work to these legendary animals. Dr. Sharp's doctoral research explores the history, genetics, and symbolism of the breed that built the 19th century cattle drives. But he's also bringing an urgent message. In Dr. Sharp's own words, sadly, the historic Longhorn is being bred out of existence, to the point that they're now on the critically endangered list. Real historical Longhorns are closer to extinction today than ever before. Welcome, Dr. Sharp, to our show, or maybe I should say conversation.
Well, thank you a lot. Hey, and I really appreciate you bringing up the point about the endangered status of the Texas Longhorn. And so few people know that, so few people would understand what we were talking about. So I hope to have a few minutes or at least a little time to kind of give the short version, and then hope that everybody can, show up there at our big meeting and kind of take part in the discussion.
Well, we are hard at work gearing up the event space for your presentations as we speak, actually. So go ahead and tell us a little bit more about that, because I would agree your casual observer would have no idea that the Longhorn is critically endangered. They seem to be everywhere. So what do you mean by that?
My story. You're telling my story, exactly, because, especially here in Texas, when you drive around, you can't hardly drive any of the major roads or back roads without seeing, Longhorns out in the pasture. Your words, they're everywhere, and there are a lot of Longhorn registered animals. So how can they be on the endangered list? And I'm going to just digress a moment and go back to 1994. And I was in that same mindset. I had just found out in the spring of 94 that I was going to be able to write my dissertation that, like you mentioned, was on the history and symbolism of Texas Longhorn cattle. So I was doing a lot of research, and I kept hearing this same story that I know you and other history buffs have heard many, many times, and it is that even though the Longhorns were once near extinction, that was like in the early 1900s, that due to the efforts of a few ranching families, the state of Texas, the federal government, and later on some Longhorn associations, their numbers kept growing and growing and growing until 1994, when I started work on my dissertation. The major Longhorn associations were telling us that they had over 250,000 registered Longhorns. So the narrative is they were once near extinction, but today their future is bright and rosy, to come up with just a colloquial term. So when I first started doing research, I had read that narrative and heard it and talked to people And it's just one of the major talking points when anybody starts looking at the history of the cattle. So that was kind of what I believed. And you know the old adage, the old saying that if you tell a lie long enough and loud enough, it becomes the truth. But I heard that so many times that, the Longhorn was once near extinction, but today their numbers are great and their future is wonderful. So to me, that was the gospel truth. And then I started doing some research, and I had a lady that worked at the biggest Longhorn Association. She was editor for their big bi-monthly publication, and she gave me a list of about 8 or 10 people. She said, Frank, you need to start with these old timers in the industry, and gave me some reasons why. But you also need to go up to Oklahoma to the Wichita Mountains Wildlife Refuge. There has been a government herd there since 1927. And so put that on your to-do list. Well, I did. That's the first place that I took my family when I started doing research. And here we were sitting up there, and very few minutes had passed till I was sitting across the table from I think the park superintendent that was, over the bison and the Longhorn. And he looked at me and he said, yes, Frank, there are a lot of longhorned animals out there. But what you and I would consider the true, original, historical Longhorn is closer to extinction today than it's ever been at any point in its history. And I was dumbfounded. I can't even tell you how shocked I was. And I had all of these thoughts running through my mind, like, does this guy not understand what's going on? Does he not know about the 250,000 registered Longhorns? All of these thoughts. And I left there kind of in a daze, but remember I had a list of 8 to 10 to 12 of the old timers that I had left to go interview and do research with. And sure enough, the second person I talked to told me the same thing. The third person, the fourth person, right down the list. Everyone on that list told me the same thing. Yes, there are a lot of Longhorns out there, but they are not what you and I would consider the true original Longhorn cattle. So tell me your thoughts now at this point.
Well, I know that, speaking for me personally, I've seen several ranchers and so-called cattle drives that are, I guess, geared towards tourists more than anything. And some of the horns on those animals are so gigantically large that they almost make me pity the animal. They're hard to walk. Their head sways side to side with every step that they take. And when I think about the true Texas Longhorn cattle, that's not the image that comes to mind. So that's where my confusion has always been. Where are all of these supposedly registered Texas Longhorn cattle that don't look anything like a true Texas Longhorn? Where are they coming from?
Boy, that's such a great question. And here's the best answer I can come up with, because you can imagine, of course, if we're going back to 1994, how confused I was for months and months. And I kept putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And here's what is actually going on. The industry basically went horn crazy. And if you go to a Longhorn sale or a Longhorn show now, it's all about the horns. and nothing else. I mean, yeah, you'll hear people talk about their body size and their color, and you'll hear things, but the industry narrative is the animal that has the longest tip-to-tip horn span is the best Texas Longhorn. And that becomes so prevalent and also so ludicrous that you could find an animal that had real long horns, but yet if it was a cow, let's say, maybe it couldn't conceive a baby, or if it did, it didn't have a good enough bag to give the baby milk, or it was infertile, or it did not have a very long life expectancy. It wasn't very hardy. You just go down all the negative traits. That doesn't matter. What matters in the modern Longhorn world is how long the horns are. And it got so, again, ludicrous. Years ago, I came up with an analogy, but this is actually the truth. Brad, let's just say you went to a foreign country somewhere, and you could pick one, but just, let's just say Afghanistan. That just popped in my mind. Let's just say you went to Afghanistan and you saw some sort of a bovine over there that had super long tip-to-tip horn span. Well, you could ship it to the United States, and if you could fib just a little bit on a registration application, you could have that Afghanistan cow that had no genetic ties in any way to the United States or to Texas. And if you would fib on a registration application, you could get that Afghanistan bovine registered as a purebred Texas Longhorn. And I've even made, some people call it humorous, but the analogy, Brad, you could register your dog, your wife, or your donkey as a registered Texas Longhorn in these big associations if you would just fib a little bit on the registration applications.
Well, Dr. Sharp, I guess then my next question would be, if we know what a Texas Longhorn is not supposed to look like necessarily, maybe you could go into a little more detail of what we should be looking for when we expect a true, genuine Texas Longhorn.
Oh, and that's such a great question, and thanks for that. And in a way, you're kind of reading my mind too. I will bring with me, for our meeting. And Brad, tell everybody, if you would, the exact time, where it is, and let's see if we can get some people out to continue this discussion.
We are prepping the event center right now for your presentation on the 31st of July at the Ford County Historical Society Museum at 310 Gunsmoke in Dodge City, Kansas. The cattle presentation that we're talking about right now will be at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but as I recall, we're going to have you in the morning as well, in case folks want to come out first thing in the morning at 10 o'clock for another presentation, and we can talk about that later if you so choose.
Yes, and for those people who come out to see our presentation, what I will bring with me will hopefully answer almost all the questions of what the old-timey, the historical cattle look like. So here's what you can expect to see. I'm going to bring a lot of visual images of the cattle in the late 1800s. I'll have 2 or 3 dozen photos because they were taking photos of cattle and even trail drives and other things back at that time period. So I'll have photos. I'm going to have some also images of what some noted artists and painters were drawing when they were looking at the cattle. And most of you historians will know names like Remington and Russell and Frank Ray, who was known as the painter to the Longhorns. They were all looking at the cattle in the late 1800s and painting them and drawing them. And I think Frank Ray even took a few photographs. But I will have all of that with me. And then I'll also have images of some artifacts. And by artifacts, I mean horn sets, horn mounts, some shoulder mounts of animals that were alive in the late 1800s. So to wrap it all up, you'll have all sorts of evidence, if you will, of what the cattle look like, from photos to paintings, and you'll be able to see, what the actual horns looked like from some of the horn mounts. So I would think that there would be very little doubt as to what those original cattle look like.
That is fantastic. I'm very much looking forward to checking out all those artifacts and art that you'll be bringing. I hope we have a great turnout for this. As you said, I think most people don't know really what a true Texas Longhorn is supposed to be. So this will be a wonderful presentation to come check out in Dodge City, Queen of the Cowtowns. Perfect time for this. I'm very excited.
Me too. And thank you guys for the invitation. Of course, I get to come from the middle part of Texas. And, I think that was probably implied in the introduction. But I live right in the very middle of Texas, just a few miles north of the geographical center of Texas. And I was born, raised in Texas. I'm about as Texan, I would guess, that you could get. But even though I work for the state of Texas Longhorn herd, and they are overseen by Texas Historical Commission, I office out of Fort Griffin. And Fort Griffin is another one of the state historic sites of Texas Historical Commission. So I'll be bringing this program to Dodge City from Texas Historical Commission, from Fort Griffin, from the official state of Texas Longhorn herd. So that's what people can expect to come see and come hear when they come to the presentation.
Well, that's the wonderful thing about Dodge City. Something that will never change is how proud and honored we are to have that shared relationship with Texas and the cattles and just the history. That shared relationship between our two states is like nothing else in the American West. So we are super honored to have you, Dr. Sharp. Well, while I've got you, could you have a little plug for your morning presentation as well?
Oh, goodness, it will be so different where the afternoon session at 2:00 is so, historical based. It's Longhorn based, but it's also, we'll talk a lot about the cattle drives. We'll talk about the cowboy. We'll talk about some ranching heritage. So we'll see just how much we can fit in, and hopefully have a few minutes left over for some questions and answers. The morning session is going to be built around historical music. And people could kind of visualize it this way, like in that magical time period, if you will, that time period after the Civil War, when the trail drives coming from Texas made it to Dodge City. So we're talking in the 1870s and 1880s. What were people singing? Like, what songs were being sung kind of in Dodge City at that time period? And what musical instruments were they using? So that's kind of the main focus of what that morning program is.
That sounds like a great time as well. Perfect opportunity to bring your families and kids out to the Ford County Historical Society Museum and listen to Dr. Frank Sharp tell us all about the music and true, authentic cattle of Dodge City and the Texas Longhorn. Dr. Sharp, while I have you, is there anything else that you want to deliver out there and whet people's appetite for what you're going to bring in?
Oh, my goodness. We're going to be doing so much, and, as much as possible, I'm going to try to stay away from just a boring, dry lecture. As much as possible, we'll have some audience participation, questions and answers, and just like you guys, that when we start talking, Brad, you came up with some great questions that kind of gave me an inroad to talking about different topics. So we're going to be as interactive as possible, even more so in the morning program, because I'm going to bring some musical instruments, some musical percussion instruments with me. And we're actually even going to have a little audience participation where, the adults and the children can help me. And basically we'll just have fun playing and singing some old cowboy songs, some old trail drive songs.
Sounds fantastic. Dr. Sharp, thank you very much. Loved having this conversation with you and looking forward to meeting you in Dodge City.
Well, thank you. Thank you, guys.
So, folks, we encourage you to kick off your day bright and early at 10 a.m. on July 31st, 2026, over at the Ford County Historical Society Museum on 310 Gunsmoke Street for a morning jam. Dr. Sharp is kicking things off with an interactive foot-stomping session called Music on the American Frontier. Now, don't go expecting a quiet, stuffy museum lecture. This ain't that kind of outfit. Back in the 1800s, music was a vital tool for survival, keeping spirits high in dusty cow camps, lonely military outposts, and rowdy dance halls. Dr. Sharp is bringing a whole trunk of historic rhythm instruments, and he needs you to join the band. Grab some spoons, maracas, or rhythm bones and jam along to the authentic songs that shaped the Old West. It's loud, it's hands-on, and it's a blast for the whole family. After you grab some chow, stroll right back to the Ford County Historical Society Museum at 2:00 p.m. for the afternoon main event, a deep dive into the legacy of the Texas Longhorns. Mark those calendars for July 31st, 2026, folks. Both events are open to the public, so bring your singing voice, bring your curiosity, and celebrate the wild history of Dodge City with Dr. Frank Sharp. Until next time, keep your chin up, your reins loose, and we'll see you on the trail.
Come along, boys, and listen to my tale. I'll tell you about my troubles on the old Chisholm Trail. Come a tie, yippee, 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 yay. Come a tie, yippee, yippee, yay. Started up the trail October 23rd. Started up the trail with the M&M herd. Come a tie, yippee, 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 yay. Come a tie, yippee, yippee, yay.